Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, folks. Welcome to another episode of the Marketing Your Practice podcast. COVID has exposed a lot of cracks in our practices, in our lives, in many things there as well. And I've been looking forward to this episode for the last 3 or 4 months. In today's episode, I'm speaking with Australian chiropractor, Australian chiropractic royalty really, Dr. Mark Postles. Mark is one of the cleanest, cleverest and brightest minds that I know, full stop, and certainly within chiropractic as well. What I wanted to have a chat with Mark about today was really the business models that we have as chiropractors, as natural health practitioners, and why we struggle so much often to have long-term partnerships, associate relationships. Mark has a fantastic 4-quadrant model. In fact, he's written a book on it. I think it's called the Innate Model there as well, where he explains about why we have some of the challenges. I like this concept. This has been something I've thought about a lot. As natural health practitioners, we tend to be non-conformists. We didn't get into this because we wanted to follow the path of least resistance. Being a chiropractor, naturopath is not always easy. We think differently from what, in many cases, the rest of the world does. So then when we come in to run a business and have a business model, then often really traditional business models struggle as well. But we don't have a great reputation of, as I mentioned before, long-term relationships with associates and partnerships. But here's the challenge. One of the largest overheads that we have is the rent in our practice. And so many of us are practicing in, practices, expensive overheads, and there's just one of us in there as well. So in this session here, I talked with Mark about different models, and he kind of stepped us through so eloquently all the way from the single practitioner model. We talked about corporate-based models. We talked about the importance of vision and mission and the role that they have in bringing a group of practitioners together so that we can have more impact. That saying often is that if you want to go fast, go by yourself, but if you want to go far, go in a group. This was a fascinating conversation. Enough from me. Let's jump in and talk to chiropractic royalty, Dr. Mark Postles.
Welcome to the Marketing Your Practice podcast, where we guide natural health and wellness experts through the pitfalls of marketing. Each episode, you'll learn simple, effective, easily actionable, and heart-centered marketing strategies. And here's your host, Angus Pyke.
Mark Postles, welcome to the Marketing Your Practice podcast. How are you?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Angus. Thank you so much for having me on.
But it's always a pleasure. You're one of my favourite people. I feel you are one of the more clever, clearest, cleanest thinkers in chiropractic. Anytime I get to kind of hear you speak, and I have now for longer than I would be happy kind of actually saying at this state here too. How are things for you?
Oh, they're great. They're great. It's it's a real privilege to be alive at this time, I think, and to be witnessing the huge shifts in society. I think we're in exciting times.
It's nice. I talk about in my introduction of you being an incredibly clean thinker. To hear of you even saying that it's an exciting time is a nice perspective, because that's not what a lot of people are talking about. A lot of people are finding it incredibly difficult as well. I think we're going to talk a little bit about that too. I want to give just an ever so brief background of your story, or get you to have perhaps some of our listeners who might not know your background, bring them up to speed, because we're going to talk about some of the cracks that have been exposed at the moment and how we can kind of build on those. So for people who don't know Mark Postles, can you give them a thumbnail of who you are, where you're from, what you do?
Right. Okay. Well, actually, I cut the end of my thumb off when I was 2, so it's a smaller nail. So we'll just go minute on that one. I've had a profound interest in human beings and how they tick right from I suspect my very early ages, probably from the earliest time I can remember. And that drove me or led me or sort of enticed me into chiropractic as a recognition of the wonders of life, the wonders of systems and process of biological nature. And so I sort of see life through that mechanism of the powers on the inside, and it flows from above down and inside out, and it's well worth supporting that and removing any interferences we can, and allowing it to be who it is without judgment, just acceptance of the situation. So I mean, that's sort of a mega perspective. And then logistically, I then got into chiropractic and as a 22-year-old, having traveled the world for a few years, discovering what I want to do. And there was a profound awakening one night in Vancouver, Canada. I met up with a couple of guys who were chiropractic students. They told me all about this thing called universal intelligence and innate intelligence, and how chiropractic interfaces within that construct. And it's like, wow, that's got my name all over it, so I'll do it. This is it. So graduated 45 years ago, so I've been practicing for the last 45 years out of Palmer College in the States. And then I've really enjoyed a magnificent career as far as the ability to give and the ability to learn from the people that present themselves to me in various contexts. And so it's given, I think it's, there was an undertaking I took right at the beginning that if it just makes a difference to one person, it's all been worthwhile. And that was, I can distinctly remember that on that night in Vancouver, Canada. And it was like, well, there's a lot at stake here. It means you have to travel the world to, work in the mines in Australia to get the money to get to the States to, and took a couple of years in order to do that. But it was that drive, it was that one thing that I still carry with me today. So that's just flowed through into being a facilitator of change for other chiropractors. And we have a coaching business which has extended over many decades now, and supports chiros. And our job is to create leaders and what we would call way showers, people who show the way, but without necessarily an attachment to the outcomes of their of the people that they're there to inspire, and they may not even know them. So it's as distinct from a leader, which is sort of like follow me or at least lead from behind, but has a specific direction for people. A way show is one who allows people to open themselves up to their greatest self. So anyway, so within that, there's then I thought, well, there's got to be leverage here in terms of creating more of the same, and there's certain structures to do that. One is to work with people after they've graduated, after they've been indoctrinated into a certain viewpoint, and that's what we do as coaches, for example, with chiropractors and others who have sort of gone through more of an allopathic viewpoint on life, and or I could get into be more instrumental in changing the education system. So I chose the latter, as well as coaching. And so been on the board of the New Zealand Chiropractic College since 2002, and been on the steering committee or founding committee and the board of the Australian Chiropractic College over the last 6-7 years now. So it's been a startup which has been David and Goliath phenomena within the education sector in Australia, but it's getting there. We're got our head above water, and so it's really exciting. So anyway, so it's I guess my gains and thrills come from other people's, and be it at a practitioner level or within our associates. So we have 6 of us in practice in Sunshine Coast, and so and we've always run an associate practice for the last 35 years, running associate practices. So that's been the primary method of operation, and it's been in a centralized model. So rather than, we've gone out to about 3 and then said, no, let's bring it all back under one roof. So that's been, we might talk about some models too. But so that's it. I know, big thumbnail, sorry.
No, you described it as a magnificent career, and I can't think of a better word for it. Incredibly humble, but I'm not sure, and it's hard because there's no rating scale. I'm not sure that there's any other person that has had more impact here in Australia on chiropractic than what you have. I'm really just thinking, I've not stopped to actually really think about it, as my mind is ticking around now with the number of chiropractors that are chiropractors because directly their interaction with you, the number of chiropractors who are still practicing because of your coaching, your support, the number of chiropractors that you have inspired through your public presentations at Dynamic Growth and in around there too. So it's it is, when you said it's a magnificent career, I went, damn right it is. It's very inspiring as well. One of your passions of recent, and I'm seeing you talking more and more about it over the last kind of 3 or 4 years, is really the associate practice and how to do them properly. I don't know. I've had my challenges with it, which you and I firsthand, we've spoken about as well. I feel like I'm getting better at it as well. With the recent changes that have gone on globally, it's exposed a lot of cracks. And those cracks might be just as simple as people realizing, heck, my overheads are really big. And they're even more noticeable when I'm not allowed to practice, or I'm only allowed to practice in a very limited sort of format as well. And we begin to start to think of practice models. I've always been intrigued about, certainly here in Australia, it's very rare to find a general practitioner, medical doctor working in a practice by themselves. I can't think of the last time I went past a practice that had one general practitioner's name on it. There too. But that's the model for us as chiropractors, certainly here in Australia, and I think it is throughout the world as well. So I want to have a chat today. Let's dive into this kind of associate practice thing and perhaps different models of how we can practice, what you see works, what doesn't work. What's your take on that?
Okay, it's fascinating, right? Because it's the adage of, if you want to go fast, go by yourself, but if you want to go far, go with the group and
Yes.
go with the team. And so it is about longevity and momentum to be involved with the group. In terms of the GP MD analogy of group practice, I think they're being forced into by virtue of their high compliance costs, which we don't as allied health, as natural health practitioners, we're not lumbered with as much as far as that's concerned. It's increasing, and that's all taking out of one's profit. So it becomes a better proposition to go as a group as far as that particular consideration, that economic consideration goes. I think the nature of a chiropractor and probably most health practitioners, most natural health practitioners, and the naturopaths and the iridologists and the people who we work with in the context of our clinical activities tend to be very strong and opinionated about their philosophical viewpoint. In other words, they know what they want. They're there as an entrepreneur in the healthcare space. Now, the healthcare space, as it's been determined in recent times by the conglomerates, is not for entrepreneurs. It's they want to exploit a group of people who will do what they're told. And so natural health practitioners tend to not want to do what they're told. They want to do what they know is right, which is often very different. And we've seen this in the context of COVID and so forth. So, the more legislated you are, the more you have to toe the line. So I think, there's that tendency then within natural healthcare is to be the entrepreneur. As a chiropractor, we have a philosophy which is very anti-establishment per se.
Yes.
It's an individualistic philosophy, as distinct from a communistic philosophy, which is sacrifice a few for the good of the many.
Yes.
Which is what the bulk of our society is doing, as we've witnessed with the COVID scare. Put people into fear, and they will be compliant. And we know there's going to be damage. We know there's going to be a result of our decisions here of a negative nature, but we think that the general good is served by doing that anyway, knowing that there's going to be this fallout. So it's sort of it's a fascinating situation in terms of human beings and their social interactions as to who wants to go alone and who wants to go together. Now, so this sort of paradox is what we have then within a practice. Do we have our own individual practice with our own stamp on it, and we go doing exactly what we want to do and in the way we want to do it, with maybe one assistant or a couple of assistants maybe, but that's it. It's our brand, and the practice is named after us as an individual, and it's our stamp. But that personalized practice has far less commercial value in terms of being able to exit and being able to get away for a holiday and so forth. So it becomes a problem. So there's an upside and there's a downside to that. So our question has always been within this: how can we get a group of nonconformists to conform, or at least to conform around something? And so one of the things that I realize is that, and people do realize, is that the bigger the vision, the bigger the purpose, the more the buy-in.
Yes.
So this allows us to have people who are very, very different as individuals in a context that's bigger than the whole.
Yes.
Right. So it's huge. And so we will stay together and work together, but work individually. So this is this paradox thing. It's just like, well, why would you want to have people who are different to you and work individually within a group, within a team? It's like there's no I in team. No, there is. There's a bunch of I's. Every person there is an I. And so, it's about honoring that rather than trying to give everyone the same flavor. So that's what tends to happen. I think, to go back to the medical example, that tends to happen within the amorphous group of medicine. It's very highly regulated and highly controlled. Whereas the chiropractic group, it's like having or the natural healthcare that are registered, having to comply with that regulation, but still be individuals and still have their identity. So there's a real challenge there.
Yeah. And so am I seeing, because there's something I want just to make sure that I kind of got in that concept through there, that there is a model where we can have multiple people in a team where they don't have to sacrifice identity, because it does seem that, you're going to come and work in my practice. Here's the systems. Here's how you'll do your initial consultation. This is the way that we dress here in this place. We do these hours. We tend to work with these kind of techniques, which is all about the practice. There's very much no I in those circumstances there. And I could see, for me personally, for me to work under that umbrella would be very, very difficult as well. And coming from, I really like that concept of us, how do you get a bunch of nonconformists to conform? But there is a model where there can be success, where we retain our identity, yet still have, something bigger than ourselves. That's what you're saying, yeah?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. The culture and the why, the purpose of why we're together and why we're doing what we're doing has got to be much, much bigger than anyone. Otherwise, other individual agendas are going to overrule.
Yeah. And so we're putting ourselves, the common goal is not under, in my life chiropractic and these hours and these systems. The common goal is really how we serve the community, what we stand for as far as kind of health values. We build our value system and our common goal just up a few levels rather than that. That's such a lovely distinction from there too. So am I seeing that right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It's just, how big can we go? What is our big why, and what's the ramifications, like, for example, the ripples of effect that you're having on humanity, just by us talking today, by every listener going in and addressing Mrs. Jones or Mr. Smith, who they come in today with respect and with seeing the potential in this person, and knowing that everything you do, say, and don't say is having an effect that is going to change the interactions of that person in their life. So yeah, it's a massive. It comes right down to the granular. It comes right down to the individual situation, but it's infusing that idea that we're here as a conduit of change, which we don't determine, which is sort of, once again, paradoxical.
So I see inside of this, the practice principle, the owner, whoever they are there too, they're going to need to give up some of the need of control to some extent. Well, probably to a lot of extent there too, once we can kind of agree on what our overarching principle is as well. And to then the same extent there as well, the associate in there as well. I mean, everybody's going to need to give up some level of control, but I could see that for me, as I'm perhaps exposing more of myself here too, that there needs to be that freedom of me relinquishing an element of control of how the people will work within me. Is that difficult for some people to do? How do you get them to move beyond that? What systems do you put in place to allow that to happen?
I think there's layers of that. Like, with a 2-year-old, you make sure you've got control of that kid's arm when you're crossing the road. It's like there's control there for the safety and the effectiveness of something to occur. So that it's really important to have control. What's important though is that we're not doing the same thing when that kid's 16. Or when that kid's 35 or 60. There's about relinquishing control, and as trust comes in, as trust is earned. So it's not like you don't have control, but what I think we do there is by giving the vision and then giving the why to everything that we do. This is why we do it. So, like, for example, the policy manuals that we would suggest to our clients is always have the purpose for why we're doing this. So it could be putting the rubbish out, but what's the purpose? And so when we state that, we know that we're doing an honourable task in this particular context. And if there's a script involved, not necessarily would be with rubbish, but there'd be that purpose will go through into the script. So it's not about the script. The script's just a guide. It's about the essence that comes from the heart, because the heart gets turned on by big purpose. The heart brain is a massive driver for our mission. So it's about connecting with that, and then we bring that into what we're going to do, and then that allows us to do that with that flavor of the eye of the individual, even though there's a generic script. So that's where it starts to, the edges get fuzzy, because we have direct control. This is the script. This is what you're going to say, but then it's like, well, this is why you're saying it. And so how is that why to you? How would your tone be? What would your inflections be? What would your process be relative to this? So the person can then make it their own. So within that, then you've got this group of individuals who are functioning at different layers of that those levels of responsibility, from working directly working under direction, through to those who are working generatively, creating in a very free and high level of human consciousness. So there's a range. So it's not just cut and dry, but saying, oh, you just got to let go of control. It's like, yes, it's about having very strict control at some levels and allowing to be controlled at other levels, and allowing no control at other levels. So it's like,
yeah, and I can see how, if we go back to dealing with the non-conformist, that if we're asking them to do something, but letting them know why, here's why we've chosen to do this, and here's how this comes back to meeting, what ultimately our goals of the practice are. I could see why that's such a much more inclusive and powerful conversation, as opposed to saying, look, we start our initial consultations this way. This is the way we do our scheduling, all of those kind of things there as well. How do we, in terms of the business models that go with this as well, because invariably the two sides of the equation that I often hear is I hear the associate saying, I feel like I'm making all this money for them. Like, I'm bringing in, $5,000 a fortnight there too. And, and 3 of it goes to them. And I'm the one that's adjusting all the people. I'm the one that's doing all of that kind of thing. And then, the flip side of that conversation that we will, I'll hear some of the principals talking about is they're entitled. They don't understand all the things that I do in the background, and they just get to turn up to work and I'm training staff and doing all those kind of things. How do we get people on the same page there? What business model works best for that?
Well, I mean, this depends on, firstly, we look at this as a brain-based phenomenon, and the book I wrote on the Innate Model has states this quite clearly in terms of observation of human function based on our neurology. And some of us are more right brain than others, some are more left, some are more forebrain oriented, some are more hindbrain. So we have our preferences, and so there are businesses get seem to express, any organization that involves people seems to express a similar sort of phenomena here. There's some right brain businesses, some left brain businesses, some hind brain, some forebrain. And within that, we've got 4 quadrants, which do interact with each other in a fairly predictable way. And that is that we have an idea about something, a philosophy, a dream, a vision, and that's that right frontal area that invokes the heart. It just, the heart gets so involved with that one. And so, yeah, I'm so passionate about this. And so that then has to be ordered, otherwise it just floats away. It's not concrete. It's very, it's just out there, but it's amazing, it's moving. But until it's organized, it keeps changing and it keeps, flitting around. So that first part, that idea part, is the entrepreneur. It's a pure entrepreneurial spirit of just like, yeah, I can create this. This is amazing, and come on, guys, let's go do it. Follow me. And that's sort of the charismatic component of the chiropractor or natural health practitioner who's on top of the totem pole. I'm the tribal chief, and just do what I say. I went to a seminar this weekend. We learned all about this, so then we're going to do it. We'll just do it. Forget about everything we did last week. We're going to do this now. So that becomes it's a style. It's a management style. It's a practice style. It has its great attributes because it's very easy to move. It can shift and pivot really quickly. But it has downsides to it too, because it's not sustainable. It doesn't have time to get the momentum going before the next thing happens. So that's what we call the quadrant 1 style of practice, or tribal type of practice. When we start to get some organization into our business, we start to bring things into a more regulated format. So systems and procedures, we develop some strategies. This is left posterior brain function. It's looking at the past, looking at what's worked, throwing out anything that's too scary, which means that the big ideas that the quadrant 1 part has to be filtered through this. Well, can it be done? How's this going to work? What are we dealing with here? What's the cost? What's the risk? All that sort of stuff. All the fiduciary things are dealt with at that level, and it's really important to have that. So if we've got this entrepreneurial spirit going out there, and the face of the business, and then we've got some support behind it in terms of organized systems and procedures and policies and so on, then that's the second layer, which is a more of a corporate style of business. Now, often if the business goes too much that way, in other words, if the corporates get hold of it, it loses its fire, it loses its vision, it just becomes a machine that is hierarchical, and people are fighting over their rank in the machine, and it functions and it's quite financially good, but it loses its soul. It becomes like a government, or like maybe like the education system or whatever. It's like hierarchical. So, but it's necessary. That's the whole point. They're integrated phenomena. So the big idea of that quadrant 1 part flows into the quadrant 2 part, that then makes it usable, that then kicks it across. So that's the second type of practice. We'll see, we do see practices around that are very, very regimented. Everyone knows exactly, there's labels on every position, there's labels on every function, there's labels on every chair. You just know where you stand. Then the next part is that quadrant 3 part, which is like a basilar right brain part, which is the worker, the doer, the person who loves the craft, the artisan, the chiropractor, the naturopath, the herbalist, the acupuncturist. So, the person who loves just to get in there and do their thing. Right. So very commonly, because this is a very collaborative workspace too, that, this style just loves working with people, supporting people, working for people, and will just as a humble servant. So the entrepreneurial part normally has this part as its reason for being entrepreneurial. Right. Yes. So often we find that most natural health care tends to go to the right side of the brain, and therefore their businesses are right-sided businesses, right brain businesses. So their heart space, this connects with the gut, so it's kinesthetic. They're looking at working with their people. They love their people. They're faithful servants to their people. But there's bugger all organisation in place, because that quadrant 2 part is neglected because it's seen to be cold and staid and, lacking soul. So, so the challenge here is to integrate these through this organisation, which brings nurture to the business.
Yes.
So that then allows the quadrant 3 part for the right brain component to then do its best work. And this is where you have a practice that everyone puts input. You don't always know who the leader is. Like in the quadrant 1 style, the leader's on top of the totem pole. The owner, the leader, the spokesperson. In the hierarchical arrangement in quadrant 2, it's like, well, the leader's the CEO, and the person who's top of the pyramid, and everyone else is below trying to knock them off. But anyway, so then you get the collaborative workspace where you have a group of people sitting in a circle, and they're all interchanging, all giving ideas, and all growing this thing together. They would have their own identities as well, but there's respect there that allows them to be different, but within a certain conformity. There's still a lot of conformity at that level, but things take a long time to get done. There's also often things don't get done because there's so many different ideas. There's sort of downsides to that too. So every one of these areas by themselves has a downside, and even collectively we bring those downsides through, but we also bring the upsides through. So this group of people then would have process and protocol, and they love that. They love to have something that they can have a ritual, so that then their practice members are going to be delivered to with the best of their skills. And they're not about the money. They're not about the fame. They're there to serve their people. So then that style of practice, that's the third style of practice, is a group who get together and love to sit in a circle and have fun together. And productivity is there, but it's not their primary thing.
Yeah.
Then the fourth type is back into that quadrant 4, which is the forebrain on the left side. So it has organization and structure, but it still adheres to the big ideas. So when we flow our vision through our organization, through our exquisite delivery, we then can form a structure that is a facility for the eyes, a facility for the people to do their best work. And they're not having to conform to a uniform design. They can do their best work within a certain framework. And if you think of it like this is like a department store, right? This is like, to take an Australian, David Jones, or Macy's, or and so within that though, you've got the menswear floor, and you've got your Hugo Boss, and you've got your Amati, and you've got this and you've got that. You've got these big brands, real big heavy hitting brands, but they're all in the same area together, and they're working together. They support each other, but they're in competition as well. So we call that comparation. Right, so there's this paradox that starts to show through, and they have very different styles. Like our practice is people wearing chiros who are going bare feet, and most of us are in shorts anyway. But it's sort of like there's not, everyone can be their individual self. And there's an honoring of that, and also because it pushes buttons. So there's going to be much more dispute. Whereas in the quadrant 3 style practice, you don't want to, everyone's got to be in agreement. So, but in the quadrant 4 style practice, it's got to be robust disagreement and discussion and issues that come up and so forth. But it's dynamic, and it's something that the owner is not even necessarily on the scene. But the owner is just making sure that the facilities are functioning for these people to do their best work. And so it's a different level again to that collaborative style of practice, where the owner's making sure that everyone's back's getting rubbed at all times, whereas that sort of comparation style is one of making sure that everyone's got whatever they need, and there's guidance of that. So that brings in that control thing from the beginning that you mentioned at the beginning. You're going to have juniors there, then you're going to have intermediates, you're going to have seniors. Like, we've got one of our associates been with us for 25 years. Another 10, has been in practice for 20 years, got her own practice, but she comes in and works with us as well, because she likes the energy of it, and they're leaders in their own right within the profession. So, it's sort of like that's a level that one can aspire to, and I think we're always becoming in that area. I don't think we ever make it, because it's this dynamic of diversity and challenge where people can do their own techniques, and there's all the underlying processes though that the practice is marketed on, and people expect, the public expect, but within that there's the individual expression. And so that then allows people to, our clients, our practice members, to seek out that which is right for them at this point. So it's certainly not bland. And but what we find is people then don't leave the practice; they'll just leave it a practitioner, they'll go to another one for a period of time, so then go to their next level.
How would somebody work out if they're thinking, man, that quadrant 4 practice really sounds like something I'd like to be a part of? How would somebody go about working out whether they are the kind of person that's likely to be an owner or perhaps an associate that works inside of that? Your thoughts on that?
Well, associateship is often, sort of seen to be a lesser thing, a lesser business model, but it's a valid business model. I mean, the chiropractor, I won't mention names, so the chiropractor's been with us for a long time. In fact, the top 3 chiropractors in terms of longevity use it as a cash flow model. And they then go out and have significant investment portfolios with real estate and other investments that they've used by judicious financial management of the cash flow that they're getting as an associate. So, when you can walk in, walk out and take your 40 to 50% and go without any worries about management, about all the details of compliance and hiring and firing, all that sort of stuff, it's not a bad gig, So to go back to your question about, the associates, like, they're getting half of my money. Consider what the overheads of the average practice is, and you're talking a really well-run practice could maybe do 30%, but generally 35 to 45 would be a range.
Yes.
So you put in a lot of work as the owner. If you're just getting 40% and your associates are walking out with 50, you got 10%. Thanks very much. It's like, it's a bit of a no-brainer. Be the associate. But at the other hand, it's about creating too. It's about creating the vision. So the person who has an aspiration to go to that quadrant 4 style, just gets clear on their what they're offering, what their vision is, gets an impeccable process in place, brings around people who love doing what they're doing and they're really good at it, and they're collaborative, and then grow that into people who will come into that mix and actually morph it through into empowering those people who are sort of being based because I think they've got to being their own superpower within their own right. And though you'll see those people starting to pop into their power. So it's sort of an evolutionary thing, but it's like every function that we have within our life goes through those 4 steps. It's like we have an idea, we find out what it's about, we find out how to do it, and then we get in there and we change it, we reinvent it, we constantly disrupt it into a new idea. So,
Mark, how does the 4th quadrant practice deal with expectations? And expectation management in particular?
Well, it expresses.
Yes.
So it would definitely express its expectations, and be willing to constantly reinvent itself and investigate itself relative to its expectations. Because I think one of the greatest, one of the greatest things that brings practices undone is the expectations that have been either undeclared, but probably more so unrecognized.
Yes.
So unrecognized expectations is like, I didn't even know that I had this expectation, and it doesn't normally show until the proverbial hits the fan, So that would then lead to stronger agreements or clearer agreements. So making sure that whilst the expectations are constantly being uncovered, the agreements are being redefined as well. Because it's like some people have this thought that they don't want their associate to leave and go down the street. Our whole business has been built on that. We've got 9 of our ex-associates around us right here. Every one of them have left and paid us for the goodwill component. We've sold our business off like more than once over, and we still have the business. So, and so now what we've done is equity sharing of some of the capital of the businesses as well with the existing associates. So, there's different models there. I mean, obviously time doesn't permit us to go into the details of that, but there's different models where a natural health practitioner can create a sort of a corporate entity that has real kick-ass effects and benefits for all. And it empowers people to come up through that their own evolution relative to business and their ownership of integrating their trade and their profession into a business structure. So,
yeah, Mark, I think that we are sitting on the precipice of, different models in terms with how us as natural health practitioners can have more impact, more enjoyment, more influence across our communities as well. And I think a big part of it is a new business models that we need to be working on. Some of us are working so damn hard running our practice that we're not able to do our magic, and to kind of roll it out through here as well. Can you tell, I'd like to know a little bit more about the coaching that you do with regards to this too, because you're constantly taking groups of practitioners through where they clear all this up. So if somebody's at this stage now thinking, man, I didn't even realize that 4th quadrant was a possibility and I want to explore it more. Tell us a little bit about how that kind of coaching works and how somebody could find out a little bit more if they want to start to explore that.
Sure. We have, specifically around that model, we have 3 ways that can be developed. One is there is an online course called the Associate Driven Practice System, and that's something which we can give you the link to that, and that's a do-it-yourself with a monthly call just to keep you on track. Then we have a model that has all the resources in it to develop this and more. So it's a membership area where we call it the ocean, and that's where it's just like got all the goodness of what the ocean has to offer. And we have a lot of engagement in that with practitioners sharing and so forth. We have for the aspiring $1 million+ revenue practices, then we have the captain's table. And that's more of a consultancy working with them in terms of strategies around that. So depending on where they're at, and probably the best thing to do on this is just to private message me and we'll have a chat. We usually just allocate half an hour and go through where you're at, where you want to go, what your expectations are around that, and then how we might be able to help, and if so, at what level. So.
And you mentioned a little bit about your book also, that really talks a lot about these models as well. If somebody wanted to have a read of the book, what's the best spot for them to get a hold of that?
Yeah, it's theinnatemodel.com. That's available on Amazon and Kindle. So, or we can send them out of here if you're in Australia.
Yeah.
So the Innate Model, IN number 8 model, MODEL.com.
Yep.
So that's, and do a free quiz online and get a sense of where your quadrant preferences are. So that determines, where your superpowers are and where you're best to find someone else's superpowers to come along for the ride with you, because they'll be able to carry the load that you don't particularly like carrying.
I think if we can learn to insert ourselves in the right roles in front of this, the 4th quadrant practice solves a heck of a lot of problems for a lot of people, including our community of people who are looking for a solution. But sometimes we just don't, as practitioners, have the system set up to be able to care for them in the way that they need to as well. So, Mark, another damn fascinating conversation here. Your 4-quadrant model is not new to me, but every time I hear you talk about it, I pick up distinctions and I'm like, why did I not get that when I was reading through it in the first place there as well? Do you have any kind of final thoughts that you want to kind of share with our audience with regards to, state of affairs, where things are at, how they can have more impact, influence in their community?
Well, I think that statement you just made there, Angus, about how come I didn't get that? I would say exactly the same thing. So what we don't, where we are right now is a result of the journey that we've had to this point and the distinctions that we've made along the way. And when we're available, then the next thing shows.
Yeah.
So I think this is an individual journey. It's also a societal journey and a global journey. It's a journey of humanity. Mm-hmm. And I think we're starting to see in humanity awakening up. There's opposing forces are starting to make themselves known, and that's why it's an exciting time. There's in the past it probably would have meant war in a traditional sense. I don't know whether that's going to necessarily occur now. It could, but if we devolve, it would. And if we evolve from this, then we're going to get a different form of collaborativeness, of exchange, of industry, of respect and so forth. So I think bring on this diversity, and let's slug it out in a prefrontal way rather than revert to our reptilian past. And so, there's part of it trying to hold on to that. There's part of it trying to reinvent. And I think chiropractic is right on the cutting edge of this, and natural therapies generally, because they've been so suppressed over time. And it's a history of mankind that it has been suppressed, and it is now entering this time with this right brain phenomena, because of our awareness now of the quantum field, is able to recognize that our energy and our effect is massive. Without doing anything, we actually just be ourselves, and all of a sudden things start to shift. So I mean, that sounds pretty fluffy, but it's you start to look at the science of it. It's like, oh hell yeah, that's actually works. So I think this is the quadrant 4 era, because it's an area we haven't used other than to control and manipulate in the past.
Yeah,
and I believe that we can enter that.
I can add nothing to that statement other than to give a big heart smile at you as well. I couldn't agree more as well. Mark, thanks so much for all that you do. It is a truly magnificent career that you're a living example of an evolution for this. There are times in my life where I feel like, I'm 45, and then I tell myself reasons why I'm on the downside of some kind of curve. And then I see what the brilliance that you continue to come in. I find it incredibly inspiring. So thank you for all that you do as well. And thanks for sharing with us so generously today.
Angus, and thank you. That I really appreciate those words, but that's reflecting you. I mean, you have contributed right from your times at college all the way through. You've been the one that stands up, that says what you think, that is willing to go that little bit extra, to try on the new, to reinvent yourself, to move the world forward. And it's great, and you've got a fantastic medium for it. I really enjoy listening to your podcasts, and it's you get some great guests on, and it's really cool. It's really very, very open, and I really appreciate it and wish you all the best.
Thank you, buddy. Look forward to seeing you in person, hopefully sooner rather than later. Take care, Mark.
Sweet. All right. See you, Angus.
If you enjoyed listening to this podcast, you have to come and check out the Community Influencer Program. It's my monthly coaching program where we take all this material and I'll work one-on-one with you to apply, implement, systematize, and help guide you and your practice to the next level. Now you can join me over at adiomedia.com/join. That's adiomedia.com/join. I'd love to see you in there.